Do you ever wonder, what's my therapist really thinking? I'm Maddie.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Dre. And we are
Angsty Therapists.
We're here to give you the angsty truth.
About everything therapy and mental health.
Totally unhinged.
Okay, maybe not totally unhinged. Let me save that for my own therapy.
What do you want from me? Do you want my honesty? Don't you know that I can be a little bit angsty? What do you want from me? Do you want my honesty? Don't you know that I can be a little bit angsty?
Welcome back to Angsty Therapists, where every week we break down mental health misconceptions and therapy mishaps. This week, we're talking about how being in a relationship with a therapist may or may not be a complete nightmare. Welcome, buddies. How are we doing today?
I'm tired today. My brain is half working, so we will do our best, and that's all we can ask for.
Wow, we're really selling the energy to the listeners.
Do you ever get that like extra energy though when you're like overtired, where you're kind of like you get the crazy eyes and you're like, I have never felt
So
better. Yes, I think I thrive. But anyway, so why I was thinking about this topic was I was thinking about how, like, as a therapist, it's almost like you gain this superpower. Like, you go to grad school and you like learn these skills, right? You learn how to listen to people. You learn how to like reflect back what they're saying to you in a really wise and empathetic way. Like, you learn just so much about the human experience, and how dating a therapist can be really challenging because therapists maybe they've got a little bit of like an ego about their own listening.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
I don't understand. Can you say that a different way, please?
Well, speaking from my own personal experience.
Yeah, make it about you. Don't generalize. Ugh, terrible therapist moment, everyone.
True. Okay. I think that I have an ego about being really effing good at listening to people and really effing good at reflecting back what they're saying to me.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like I'm giving safe container. I'm giving empathetic listener. I'm giving like, a warm sip of tea. Like I'm
best friend you never thought you could ever have,
Yeah.
Wait, let's give a little example. Like, if I were to say something like, Dre, I'm just feeling really like down today. Like, what would you say? What would be your like therapy flex response?
But I'm dating you?
Yeah.
God. Okay. It's getting hot and spicy over here in the studio.
Dre's like, never gonna happen. Never gonna happen.
Oh, God. Yeah, well, I think I think I would go a little bit more generic at first, and it just be like, because you wanna just dip your toe in. You don't want to go like full into like the where in your body are you feeling that, and what is your deepest trauma? Like.
But haven't we all done that? And that's when they never text you back. Like, I've full on done the intense dive. And like, I think it was like after the first day of grad school. And then I went on like a Bumble date. Not a friend date, a real date, Maddie. I went on this full Bumble date and like fully overcompensated for like all the knowledge I had just learned in class. I'm pretty sure I was just, and the funny thing is our first class was ethics. So maybe I was being like, how do you ethically feel like that's going to work in the real world? Like just stupid. Like, we haven't even gotten to like a therapy class yet, but I'm like so on fire for like my therapy learning.
Yes. No, I do relate to that. I feel like for me, it's more, I'm immediately trying to suss out like what their attachment style is. I'm like, okay, like Like, are you gonna be texting me like every like 5 seconds, or like are you gonna like say hi to me like once and then I don't hear from you for another 5 years?
What are some
Yeah,
of
there's
those
this.
questions that you're like, okay, I'm testing our compatibility based on your anxious attachment vibes right now? Like, what are you asking?
Yeah, well, I actually ask about like friends, and so like, what are like your friendships like?
You're like, hypothetically, if I never responded to your text, what would trigger you in your body about that?
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah, I think it's
yeah.
like being a therapist, it makes you very obnoxious because it makes you just think that you like can understand everybody. Like it's like I can take one look at you and like I know that like when you were 17 like your mom left you at school and never came to school to pick you up, and that's been like a core wound for you ever
gosh.
since, you know?
That was so
But-
specific.
Drive your
Mads.
damn car. No, just
Not
Do you
that that happened to
talk
me.
about that? Yeah, there definitely is a period of just, again, like over calibrating the vibes where you're like staring deeply at somebody and you're like, wow, they seem really upset. And they're like, and then later in the day, they're like, by the way, I haven't pooped in 4 days. So I was just feeling a bit of like the constipated pains. And you were like, whoops,
Oh my
misread that expression because I'm in therapy school and I'm overexcited.
I always feel like I come off like too intense. So like I actually I will not disclose anything that happened on this date for the sake of the other person. But I
Trey went on a date yesterday.
Woo!
and I felt myself like looking at them, and I'm just like, okay, don't look too much, look away, don't make them feel uncomfortable, don't ask that question, like that's too deep, you don't want them to think that you're therapizing them. And I even said that at one point, I'm like, oh damn, that was a therapy question. They're like, yeah. But I'm gonna answer it anyways.
Oh, true winner.
It's the eye contact for me too. Like people are always telling me that I'm intense, and I think it's
Yeah.
the eye
Yeah.
contact. Like I could look at you.
Yeah.
It's like I think I've learned how to straight up stare at someone without blinking for like 20 minutes, to the point where like my contact lenses are like detaching from my eyeballs like as I'm looking at them, but I'm still maintaining like perfect eye contact. You know?
That is so real on a different level, because
God.
I think it's like an over projection when you're afraid to like not have eye contact on your client. For me, it comes from a place of like when I was in a therapy session and my therapist looked over at the clock, I was like, okay, she's not in it. She's bored. And then I was like, now I'm not going to really share that
Yeah.
much. And so it's just like, I don't even want to like, half the time I'm like discreetly, like they sneeze and I like look at the clock because I'm like, I don't want them to think I'm disinterested or I'm not in it.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
it's totally that like over intense eye contact because you're like, I'm with you. I'm here. I'm in your
I
pain.
understand.
Dude,
Yeah.
Dre, I remember I just
Oh,
got this
God.
memory of this one time that you and I were at dinner. I don't know if you remember this, but we were at dinner in San Francisco.
Oh my god, I
and
do.
like you were
That was so good. Okay, sorry, continue.
Okay.
The food. I don't know what you're gonna say actually.
Oh,
The food
you're
was
like
good,
not
not the eye contact, just to get that straight.
the eye contact was scary AF, but the food was delicious. Yeah, no, but we were at dinner and I remember we were having like some intense, deep conversation as we do. And I remember I was sitting there and because we drank so much water and wine and whatever, like I had to pee so badly. But I was like, I will not break this eye contact. I will not leave this conversation. And I remember I was like, I didn't even realize I was doing it, but I was like swaying back and forth. And you were like, dude, like go to the fucking bathroom. Like it's okay.
I will get a UTI for the sake of eye contact. Oh my gosh.
That even makes me think about the fact if there's like two therapists on a date, or like two therapists engaging in like an intense conversation, because then you're like, I refuse to not ask the most profound question here. And it's like one person is like, well, how do you feel about that? And the other person's like, where do you feel like that trauma bond really came from? And then the other person is like, can you actually come back to the memory where projection and repression became a really big theme for you in your generational trauma? Like, you're just throwing in like all the words to outdo the other person.
It's such an outdo. I feel like that happens even just when therapist friends are in the room together sometimes, where it's like two therapists or three therapist friends even, or two therapist friends, and one person is like sharing something deeply about their soul, and the two like one of them's like, oh, that seems so hard for you. And then the other one's like, wow, that makes so much sense given everything you've shared and that one story that you told us 10 years ago that I remember because I was listening, Amy, and you weren't because you didn't mention it.
It's so true, dude.
Too accurate. But I think that also gives way to just like the need for therapeutic humans or new therapy students or new therapists in the world to like feel that every conversation needs to be the deepest conversation of your life. And you're like almost kind of like just constantly needing to get your fix of like deep, existential, painful conversations.
Yes. Okay. And that brings us back to the whole being in a relationship with a therapist thing. Cause I don't know if this ever happens for you guys, but like I'll have this with my husband, Bailey, where it'll be like the end of a long day or whatever. And he'll be like wanting to talk about like, I don't know, some kind of football game. And I'll like come into the door and I'll be like, why do birds cry? It's just like always needing to have like that. Yeah, just like that depth. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why dating a therapist is hard, because we're kind of some like dark souls, right?
This is just, it's too real. It's too real because I remember, especially during COVID, I would like, go on jogs because, you're working from home. You want to get that outside time. And I'd listen to like the deepest podcast about like how my gut health is causing me to like not be fully in my body, and thus is tied to like my deep traumatic wounds from my mom, not picking me up from school. That was also a trigger for me, Maddie. And then I'd like come home from this run where I was listening to this podcast and I'd sit on the floor. Jake is like, click-clacking along on his computer, and I'd be like, I'm going to now divulge my deepest childhood traumas with you, and I need you to be fully engaged and present. And Jake is giving the full, like, he's trying to keep that eye contact, but he just could not. He could not go there with me the whole time. Like, I think he'd even do the little timeout sign when he'd like need to use the bathroom, and then he'd be in there for a long time. I'm pretty sure he was just avoiding the rest of the conversation. He's like full on. I can hear like he's watching a show on Netflix in the bathroom. Like, never came back to refinish it. Like,
well, I wanted to see if because y'all two are in actual relationships, Flex, and so I'm wondering, like, have they actually shared that with, like, what is it like for them? Have they said like their feelings on what it was, the dating process, and also y'all are married and like that step? Spill the tea.
It's funny because when I told Bailey that we were recording this episode, he was like, can I be a guest star? He's like, I have some thoughts.
I want to hear him. Yeah, Bales, let's see what you got to say.
I think that Bailey has shared that it's I think that there are beautiful things about dating a therapist, which we will talk about as well. But I think some of the challenges for him are just that swimming in the world of emotions is exhausting. And that while I might get like a high from that all the time, like sometimes he's a little bit like, okay, but like, where are we going for lunch?
We want to hear from you. So follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Angsty Therapists. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, also Angsty Therapists. If you have any questions or want to let us know anything, you can email us at angstytherapist.com.
Yeah, this is so real. And this whole topic, like, literally surfaced right into my face this week because, as some of you know, I went to this like training on the Enneagram, which I'm like deeply, deeply obsessed with. And also, it didn't help that it was like at this retreat center where I had the privilege of having unlimited beet juice and turmeric. So I'm not only just like the highest camp high mountaintop experience, but now I'm literally like, I have like turmeric and kale greens and ginger and garlic like pumping through my blood. So I am like feeling like my best version of myself. And I obviously get home and I am just like vomiting profusely everything I've learned, like full on.
I thought you were gonna say vomiting the juice.
Oh,
you were like, I
honestly,
had way too much.
I wouldn't have been surprised, and it would have been like bloody red from that beet juice, as we all know, like full red. But no, I was just like a freaking fire hydrant of like. Like I'm like literally vibrating. Like I am like just screaming all this. And it's like I'm continuously getting louder too. So by the end of it, I'm like actually screaming just at Jake alone. And he's giving the wide eyes like there is so much intense energy coming to me. And now I need to go take a 4-hour nap between like the next round of this.
Okay, I have a question, like, because I'm wondering for you, Katie, like when that comes up in your relationship, is part of it that like as a therapist, you almost have to like hide yourself like throughout the day. If you are like focusing your energy on like clients or, you know, students, like your, I guess, you-ness kind of has to get like tucked away. And then like when you go home, it's like, she's back. Like, here she is in action.
Literally, it's like putting a lid on like boiling water for me. Yeah, I do have that experience a bit because I can't, if I didn't do that, I kid you not, I would talk the entire session at the person. I'm also wondering, you know, whether you're on a date or whether you're in a relationship and you're, you know, collabing, consulting with your partner, what are some of those quote unquote like therapeutic urges that you're like, I want to do this so badly, but I don't want you to sprint away as fast as you can and or think I'm unwell.
I think for me, it's just simply like the urge to psychoanalyze, whether it's the urge to psychoanalyze my partner, whether it's the urge to psychoanalyze friends or other people. Like, I think I have the urge to be like, oh, they're critical because it stems from their anxiety, which clearly happened because their parent was an alcoholic. So that's why that's happening, you know? And it's kind of like, okay, shut up. Like literally just shut up. Like we were just playing bingo, you know? Like you don't need to like, you don't need to psychoanalyze everybody. And I think it's the most annoying when it's directed at your partner, you know, because it's like, you know, you're in a fight with them and they're like, you're so lazy. And then you're like, well, you saying that is actually feeding into the intergenerational trauma that's been in your family for generations, which I can actually trace back using this genogram that I have drawn.
You're like, I've already laminated it to come back to several times.
Oh my gosh.
That's hilarious.
I feel like for me, it's not wanting to go like too fast, too quickly. And so like they'll say something like real casual, like, you know, just they're mentioning they have siblings. And I'm like, what's your relationship like with your siblings? Which is kind of a valid question. So like that's where I like, you know, I stay. And then I hear
You're
something.
like, what's your sibling order?
Yeah.
I'm bringing out Bowen's family systems chart. I am now deeply going to analyze what's gone wrong with you because you are a middle child of 3.
Exactly. Oh God, as a middle child, I relate. But Yeah, and having to literally stop myself and tell myself in my head, like, Dre, that's not appropriate to ask. Like, you don't.
That makes me think, like, do you think that part of that for you, Dre, is like, because as therapists, we kind of get access to people. Like, people come to us and it's almost like, okay, now that we're like signing this consent form, like I basically get access to you. Obviously,
To
like
your whole
trust
personhood.
Obviously it takes time. Obviously trust is built, rapport, blah 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 blah. But overall it's like now I get to like get in there with you.
Yeah.
And isn't it a little hard to like turn that off then with other
Yeah,
people?
you're like, well, this is intimacy, so literally show me everything you got.
It's also like now I'm like a data collector. Now I almost feel like I can't answer questions unless I have all the data. Truly, right? Like I literally was having a conversation with a friend about this the other day where she was like, you know, there's some things I'm learning to create some boundaries around what I disclose for my own safety, and I'm doing work on that. I don't have to share everything. And my brain instantly was like, well, then I can't really talk to you because I won't have all the data. I actually wasn't in my brain. I directly said that. But
It's almost like someone gives you, like they give you that bait. Like they say that one thing where they're like, yeah, I don't know. I'm like a little anxious about my relationship with my mom. And then you as a therapist get this like evil look in your face where you're like, excellent.
I do also think, though, it can
You're
be.
sadist.
I do want to talk a little bit about the condescending nature that can come with acting like this, though, because, and it's not just therapists.
It's
like
the worst.
it happens when people leave a conference. It happens when people start doing their own therapy. It happens when they read, you know, The Body Keeps the Score. Like it really does happen for everybody. And I think, you know, of course it can be a little bit more directly felt from us as therapists, but I do think it's important to add that I think by acting this way or by being this, we think we're building closeness. I think that if I ask you, well, when was the first time that your mom taught you the lesson that to protect yourself, you had to help people? You know, I think I'm helping you come to insight, but actually what I could be doing is harming the relationship outside of therapy, right? Because now you're feeling a bit like, okay, there's a superiority there. Right, to asking those questions. And then also just to be like ethical, right? Like not opening those wounds for everyone. It's not always the right time to do that. And so, and in terms of the condescending, I think about how, and I've really had to work on this. When Jake will say things, I'll be like, do you think you're holding a narrative of blah, blah, blah? And and now anytime I use the word narrative, even if I'm like, oh, they did narrative storytelling, he like literally shakes. He's like, I hate the word narrative. I'm not having a narrative. And I'm like, dude, like I'm not even using it in that way. But I actually created a trigger in my husband.
Oh, wow. So you have caused harm. Good. No, just...
Good. Yeah, it is. It's condescending for sure. It's almost like, we've got like our nose in the air now that we went to grad school and like, you know, have been doing this for a few years. It's like now we know everything about everything. Like it kind of comes back to the ego thing. It's like,
yeah, it's just like this holier than thou energy. And so, yeah, I don't know, just trying to check ourselves. Uh-oh, here comes the ego again. I feel like I do an okay job at that. But I even saying that, I'm like, yeah, just take a fucking seat, Dre. You're so... I can't with you. But it does... It's constant work. We're like working at work and then we're working to not work with our people. It's like, what the fuck?
yeah, work it, don't work it, take it off, put it on, take it off.
Exactly, and rinse and repeat.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I think that's why. And this is, I mean, just a broader issue, I think, with being a therapist is that it has to be one of the only jobs that really like encroaches on your personhood. It's like, this isn't just a thing that I go to and I go to my job and then I leave and now it's over. It's like being a therapist. It's like it shapes you inevitably somewhat into a certain type of person. And then it's like, but nobody wants to hang out with a therapist all the time. So like, how do you take it off? Like, how do you take it off in your relationships?
Yeah.
I do think it's being legitimately vulnerable in a real way. I've really been pushing into this concept of vulnerability versus openness. And I think one of the ways therapists can be so annoying is when they are like, yeah, I've really been struggling with body image. And then they list off like the 17 things they've done to work on it instead of just like tell you and let you explore it with them or let you be a friend to them. It's like, I'm really struggling with body image, but don't worry. I've been listening to Glennon Doyle's podcast every day and I've read 7 books and I'm not counting my calories anymore. And I blah, 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 blah. And I have a healthy, and I look in the mirror every day and give myself affirmations. And you're just like,
oh my God.
okay. So anyway.
I'm just gonna go.
Yeah. I think that being like, I think this brings me a little bit to the point of like, what can potentially be some of the beautiful aspects about being with a therapist. And I think when done well, being in a relationship with a therapist could be like the therapist is more vulnerable maybe than the average person because they've done more self-reflection than a lot of people have. And if they can do that in a way that's like honest, as you're saying, Katie, and not like holier than thou and stuck up and like, oh, I, write in my gratitude journal every day. So I actually don't really have that many issues, but it's more like, you know what? Like it's hard to get out of bed because I struggle with depression and that's how I am. And that's how it is. Like, I think that can be a beautiful part about being in a relationship or a friendship with a therapist.
Yeah, I mean that just creates like such a beautiful space and like such a beautiful space to allow folks to be themselves, which is truly a gift to share in authenticity. And also, who doesn't love to be, actively listened to, like just to like be deeply heard and seen and just like have that space where you're like, oh shit, like this person actually really deeply cares about me and is listening. It's like, okay, nice.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think the biggest compliment I've ever gotten from people when I'm genuinely not being manipulative or being egotistical with the skills I've learned or the practice that I have, right, is when I'm genuinely helping people by being so curious about them, because so few people are actually asked questions. And again, not even like, where does that trauma come from? Like, not even those, just being like, wow, like, how did that feel for you? Like, are you good?
Yeah.
Like, say more about that, and like, even just the words of like, say more about that, or what else came up for you with that? Like, that is so deeply healing and powerful for people, just doing that without all the other layers that come from our grad school overzealous selves.
Right. It is such a gift. Like, because I know just from being friends with the two of you, like, it feels so good to like be on the receiving end of somebody who's actually curious about what I'm saying and knows how to ask the right questions to like help me open up.
I think when therapists or new therapists, baby therapists find themselves doing this, the over therapizing thing the most is when their entire identity and sense of self is in being a therapist. And because then it's like, it's really hurtful when people call that out and they're like, whoa, buddy, like too deep. And then you go cry in a corner because you're like, I suck. Like my question calibration is terrible. Like the severity and intensity. And this is where I think, right, this work that we're doing through this podcast is so important, because we're saying, oh, wait, you're allowed to be a person also. Like, you're allowed to be a person. Like, your whole sense of identity doesn't have to be that. Like, it's okay if you make mistakes. It's okay if you push too far sometimes, but it's just the work we have to do of holding ourselves accountable to using our best intentions and doing better.
Preach it.
I completely agree. I think that if we're taking anything from this podcast as people who want to be in relationship with other people and hopefully not just
All the
get
therapists just
dumped
get
or-
burned. Like, no.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
relationship for you.
no. I think it's just like the goal is to, don't be a therapist in your romantic relationship, you know?
Be a
Be a
person.
Be a person.
Be kind, be sweet, be wise, know things, be a perfect, wholesome soul, be somewhat relatable, be young, be old, change fast, heal slow, your energy should be preserved, fix the evil in the world.